The world is going electric. Whether you're happy to embrace it or not, we're steaming towards a time where new cars will be battery powered. The sounds, smells and vibrations of old will be largely gone, and the cars we use every day may be no more exciting or engaging than anything else we use that needs to be connected to a plug, like a phone, or a lamp, or a kettle. Thankfully, there are enough car enthusiasts in this world that fun cars shouldn't just disappear overnight. What's more, we've got some time until we get to that electric future. However, the rules of engagement have changed. Car companies need to be seen to be doing things differently. And that is where the NSX comes in. The original NSX was launched in 1990, and it was a game changer. With a simple but effective mid-engine V6, Honda proved that performance cars could be fun and fast, as well as reliable and relatively inexpensive. The modern NSX is very different. It might still have a V6, but nothing about it is simple. That V6 is twin turbocharged, supported by no fewer than 3 electric motors. It's all-wheel drive, uses a double clutch gearbox. There are 10 radiators, and the new NSX can run on battery power alone. The reality though is not what you might expect. To have an all-wheel drive supercar with 3 electric motors sounds so complicated, like it could be a really on-off digital device, but it isn't. The engine is a 3.5 litre twin turbo unit, and integrated with that and the gearbox is an electric motor. The 2 other electric motors, those are out at the front axle. There's one for each wheel. They're separate from each other, and they are entirely separate from everything behind. Each one of them has 37 PS. The net result is 581 PS and 645 Newton meters of torque. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes less than 3 seconds. Honda doesn't give an exact figure, but it is less than 3 seconds. And the top speed is 191 miles an hour. It's quite rapid. First observation, it is monstrously fast. And also, you really can tell that the motors at the front and the engine and the motor at the back, they are separate from each other, because you can still light up the rears a little bit whilst the fronts have still got traction. It's not like an R8 where you can feel the power get moved around. They do feel very distinct, very separate. Second observation is that noise. Granted, there is some audio trickery going on. There's a pipe that goes from the engine, splits off into 2, and then those 2 pipes go to a diaphragm. That diaphragm then takes the sound waves, converts them into a type of sound wave that's better for us to hear, and then pumps them into the cabin. There are also 2 microphones at the top of the cabin, and they listen to all of the noise that isn't the engine. Then the opposite sound waves are pumped through the speakers, so you can hear the engine more clearly. It's like having mid-engine noise cancellation headphones. I don't think either of those systems are bad though, because it's not fake noise, it's not synthesized sound. Honda has just come up with a couple of creative solutions to make sure you get the most out of the engine. Third observation, because of the electric motors, there's no real let-up. Because when the engine isn't at its strongest, the electric motors are there to pick up the pace. When you change gear, the electric motors are there to keep on punching. It just doesn't really stop pulling. Fourth observation, and I really like this, and I mean I really like this, is that when you're done hooning around and you've either been in track mode, sport plus mode, or sport mode, you can knock it back and you can go into quiet mode, and the engine turns off, and I'm running on electric power alone. Granted, you don't have actually that much control over when it goes into EV mode. You can have it in quiet mode and the engine will still turn on because it needs to recharge the battery, whatever, or you've applied a bit too much throttle. But what makes it better is the fact that this car looks like it should not be able to run on electricity. Look at it, it's bright orange, it's got big wheels, it's got orange brake calipers, it looks every bit the mid-engine supercar, and yet when you pull home at night, or when you pull into a car park or a petrol station, you can put it in quiet mode and it all just switches off and you can cruise around in silence. I love that. It's so cool. Anyway, enough of that. Away from the powertrain, the science lesson continues. The steering is electrically assisted. The double wishbone front suspension and multi-link rear incorporates magnetic dampers. The gearbox has 9 speeds. The brakes are fly-by-wire, meaning there's no physical connection between the pedal and the calipers, pads and discs themselves. And does any of that make the car feel numb or digital? No. The steering might be electric, but it really inspires confidence. It's very quick as well, so you don't actually need to take your hands off the wheel. Importantly though, it feels intuitive. The weighting is lovely, and the electric motors, they never overpower the steering or the front wheels. In fact, if anything, they inspire more confidence because you've got torque vectoring. So you've got extra agility or extra stability depending on the speed. What's nice as well is that the dash is really low. It really gives you a proper idea of where the front of the car is. The suspension and the dampers, meanwhile, they hold the weight of the NSX beautifully, which is actually very important because the NSX is quite heavy. It weighs just over 1,800 kilos, which is quite a lot for a mid-engine supercar. But honestly, in quiet or sport mode, sport is the default mode when you turn the car on, it's just really compliant. It's honestly really very comfortable. It deals with some quite big bumps, quite big potholes very well. And even when you knock it into Sport Plus or Track, it's not actually that firm. The dampers then, they're just more focused on the sprung mass rather than the unsprung mass. And you can feel it feels more hunkered down, it feels a bit more get up and go, but it's not breaking your back whenever you go over a bump or a pothole. As for the gearbox, well actually on paper, 9 speeds does sound like too many. The reality is, you probably only use, if you're going quick, 4 gears, because anything beyond that, and you're kind of asking for a bit of trouble really. Up and down through the gears though, it is mega fast. Second gear now. They're super fast. And you've got that soundtrack. Yeah, like the gearbox a lot. And the brakes, they're good. Very positive, very easy to modulate. And if you weren't told that there was no physical connection between the brake pedal and the brakes themselves, you wouldn't know. And even with regenerative braking, even though when you lift off the throttle, the brakes are automatically charging the battery. When you put pressure on the brake, you can see it. There's a little dial there for how much battery reserve you've got. You can see the battery being charged. Even with all of that, the feel of the pedal is really nice. As standard, you get steel brakes, you get 370mm discs up front, 361mm discs at the rear, 6 piston calipers at the front, 4 piston calipers at the rear. This car has the optional carbon ceramic discs. Those are 380mm at the front, and the rears are the same size as they are on the steels. They're expensive, they're £8,400, but they do save 23.5 kilos of unsprung weight. That's quite a lot of weight the suspension doesn't have to deal with. What is there to dislike? Well, the window switches and the lock button, they're from the Honda Civic. There's no boot in the front because the front is filled with radiators. And you can't put ice cream or anything cold in the actual boot because it gets quite warm in there. But despite all of that, there's so much to like. It's so fast yet so easy to drive, and I love the fanatical attention to detail. You read through the material on this car and it's pages and pages long, and you get the impression, very distinct impression, that Honda engineers just couldn't help making things better. Not just better so they are enough, but better for the sake of being better, for just making the absolute best thing they could make. Like there are 2 ducts inside part of the rear subframe that actually direct cooling air onto the rear brakes. The windscreen wipers are shaped to give downforce, So even if you're driving at 180 miles an hour, you can still clear the windscreen perfectly. Who's driving in the rain at 180 miles an hour? And yet, if you want to, you can. I think what I appreciate most, though, about the NSX is, even though it's a very different car to the original, like the original, it's still very much ahead of its game, and it's not even new anymore. This car was given a minor update in 2019. One of the things that came from that was this orange paint. There are also some tweaks to the rear suspension, and then software tweaks to go with that updated rear suspension. But fundamentally, this car has been around since 2016. And yet, recording this now in 2021, only the McLaren Artura is a hybrid. Aston Martin, Porsche, Ferrari, Mercedes-AMG, Lamborghini, none of them has a hybrid. We look back at the old NSX with real fondness, and I can't see it being any different here. If this is what a hybrid supercar can be like, sign me up for more.